Hi, and welcome to Behind the Bell ATL with the Salvation Army of Metro Atlanta. I'm your host, Keely McGill. The goal of this podcast is to provide listeners with a glimpse of what the Salvation Army does. Many people tell us that they know we provide support to those in the community who need it, but they don't know exactly what we do. We hope to change that through our conversations with Army staff, clients, and community partners. Thanks for joining us. Hi, welcome to Behind the Bell ATL. My name is Keely McGill, and this is brought to you by the Salvation Army of Metro Atlanta. Today, I have Major Stacie McWilliams here.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Nice to be here.
Thank you for being here. I've gotten to work with you a lot this year, doing a lot of fun things. But for us and the listeners, can you give us a little bit about what you do here at the Salvation Army?
Well, at this juncture in my career as an officer, my husband and I are the area commanders for the Metro Atlanta area. So it's a pretty big section of Georgia that we oversee.
So I know part of your role works heavily with the women's ministry. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it does, and I enjoy it quite a bit. The biggest thing that I do with women's ministry in this role is head up the Women's Auxiliary of Metro Atlanta. It's a group of women that come together to raise money strictly for the programs of the Salvation Army here in the area. And so they fundraise and they volunteer. They help with so many different events that we have throughout the year.
Cool. Can you explain a little bit about the differences between the Women's Auxiliary and the women's ministry?
So in women's ministry and as a whole in the Salvation Army is just exactly what you would think of it as in any other church where you have a men's ministry and a women's ministry and a youth ministry. And so for the women's ministry in our core, which are our churches, just that military speak that we have, they have wonderful women's ministries groups that come together for Bible study, for prayer, to help with Vacation Bible School, and all of the traditional things that you would think of for women's ministries. They're also really branching out into some cool things with their women's ministries now, and doing things at the coffee house, or meeting at each other's homes and baking bread together and sharing life over Scripture. And so that really happens at our core level, our church level. And so for me, I oversee those women officers who have their own women's ministry groups throughout the Atlanta metro area.
That is cool. We talk about this a lot, internally, but there's such a cool structure when it comes to the Salvation Army, from when it comes to the officers and everything. So it's cool to see that, on the women's ministry side, you're kind of that lead, that you oversee the other officers that are helping. That's really cool. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Cool. And then I know you work heavily with the Women's Auxiliary. Mm-hmm. I was about to say, do you want to give a little bit into the Women's Auxiliary?
Who they are and what they do?
Yes.
Women's Auxiliary is something that was started in America in the early 1900s when a wife of a prominent advisory board member realized, of course, at that time, women were not on boards and they were not on councils and that type of thing. It was just the men. And she realized that there were a lot of powerful women and women who really wanted to help and who could do some good things in the community, whose husbands served on boards, but they couldn't. And so she formed the Women's Auxiliary, and they came together with the sole purpose of two things. Really is, and to this day, it's two things. It's volunteering and raising money, and they still do that. And there are a lot of women's auxiliaries across the territory. I hate to give a number because I know it's changed a good bit. At one point, there were about 80 across the Southern Territory. Now it's a little less now, but they're a powerful group. They really are.
Oh, I see it every day, just with the Metro Atlanta ones, which we call SAWA.
SAWA.
So the Salvation Army Women's Auxiliary. Yes. So SAWA, which is when I first started here, I was like, SAWA, where did that come from? And then I sat on one of the meetings and I was like, oh my gosh, why did I not?
This is where it comes from.
I was like, why did I not put that together?
Well, and in the Army, we have, our acronyms are insane.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
It's been I have to keep a book record of this is what this
right,
means.
This is what it means. But it takes a while.
It's fun. Speaking of fun, a lot of what SAWA does is there are a lot of fun activities and events that they do to help raise funds as one of their initiatives. Can you talk about some of those events?
Oh, absolutely. Their biggest event. We're already talking about it. We had a big meeting on it today, or it was part of our meeting today. Every May, they have a 5K, and it's called the Kettle Crush. And we just had the 10th year anniversary this past May, and they're getting ready for the 11th year, and it's going strong, and they have more ideas to try and make it bigger and better. It takes place in Marietta, around the Marietta Square, which is a very nice place for runners to go. You know, you've been there.
I did the Kettle Crush. I walked it. I'm maybe next year I'll run it, but I liked walking it this year. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I keep saying I'm going to do that too, but then I have the excuse of I need to be here.
Oh,
but it is a lot of fun, and it's a time when they can shine and they can share what it is that they're raising this money for. They are very adamant with their monies. The Women's Auxiliary for Atlanta, their pillars are homelessness, human trafficking, anti-human trafficking, youth enrichment programs, and veterans. So that is dominantly where their money goes, or any of those programs that are within our community, which we have a lot of those programs within the Salvation Army community in this area. So
it's cool to hear that there's like an internal goal, like with the SAWA ladies, like, yes, we're working to raise money, but these are our areas we want to focus
right.
in.
And they're very, very specific about that. They want to know how that money is being used, and they really keep up with it. They give money so that kids can go to camp every summer, our residential camp up in Jasper, which is beautiful. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I actually haven't. I haven't taken a trip to the camp at Camp Grandview.
Camp Grandview. Yes.
Everybody tells me that I need to go and see it.
Yeah, it's on Sharp Top Mountain is the name of it. I've never climbed the mountain. I probably never will. But it's a really beautiful place, and we send, I don't even know how many children from this area get to go. And for many children, it's the first time they've been out of the concrete world. It's the first time they've been able to just run in the field and swim in a big swimming pool and just, have a great time.
Oh, that's great that we get to have those opportunities for like the kids in our communities. So I know Kettle Crush is a big one, but do they do other events that they help out throughout the year?
They do. Their volunteering is crucial for us throughout the year. They are very integral when it comes to our Angel Tree program. They always come out and volunteer in the warehouse. They bring friends and family members to see this unbelievable event that happens every year where we, Santa's Workshop. It's not as pretty as Santa's Workshop, but it's basically what it is. And they come out and help make sure that the kids are getting the gifts, hopefully, that they've asked for, and that they get to the right place on the shelf so that they get to the right family and everything works smoothly. They also ring bells for us every year. They get out there in front of those stores and ring the bell, and it is wonderful because not everybody wants to do that. And if they've never done it, it really is a fun thing to do if you do it with your family or with a friend.
Yeah.
And just do it an hour or two. It's a lot of fun. I think they kind of challenge each other. They ring at different places and they'll kind of challenge each other. Well, my Sunday school group is going with me, and we're gonna, you get yours to go with you, and we'll see who raises the most money. And they make a lot of fun out of it. And so that's a big thing that they do. They also help very heavily at our Marietta core. Most of them live in that general area. They don't have to live in that area to be a part of auxiliary. It's just kind of the way it's worked out over the years. And so they're very active with helping them. They help with after school feeding programs. They help go in and keep their pantry stocked and set so that when people come in and need a food, it's right there ready to go. They go in and help stretch money at Christmas because all that money that goes into those kettles has to be counted, and no, the bank doesn't count it for us. So we have to count it all and get it all ready and set to go to the bank, and they go in and help them lay those dollar bills out and get them all nice and
get a clothing iron.
Yeah, so they can, we've done some crazy things to get those bills ready to go.
That's fun.
So really the Salvation Army is a bit like an onion. You're just peeling those layers and you peel and peel and peel and more keeps coming. The general population thinks that the Salvation Army is two things: thrift stores and kettles at Christmas, right? That's pretty much what we're known for. But the fact is, we are a very layered organization. And a tropical storm hurricane came in today. And as far away as we are, we're still watching it and getting ready if they should call us. And we're always into that emergency disaster mode, no matter what. So that certainly goes on and takes place. We also have our shelters, like our Red Shield Lodge that's downtown on Marietta Street. It's the largest in Atlanta, and I believe it's probably the oldest. It's been there over 50 years now in the same location. And there are over 20 programs that take place in that building every day. And it's just a beautiful thing to see. And I think when people come into the Army to do something like ring a kettle at Christmas, or to help with an angel, or shop at a thrift store, and they all of a sudden realize that there's so much more to it, they're just very interested. And then they get involved, and like you said, they're just kind of hooked, right?
Yep.
They really can't get away.
That's me. I got hooked. I got here and I was like, there's more. Like, I need to know more. And I wanted to explore that. And here we have a podcast trying to explore it. But something I really wanted to talk about too with you is, you talked about the different pillars that SAWA has. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about the overall initiative that the Salvation Army has and how SAWA supports those initiatives?
So the overall initiative of the Salvation Army globally is, of course, first and foremost, to win souls for the kingdom. And our motto, and I'm not going to say this word for word, so anybody who watches this, who is a salvationist, don't rake me over the coals, but we truly believe that our role in this world is to support those who have found themselves at the bottom of the barrel or at the foot of the cross, because there is nowhere else for them to go. And we do that by providing people with dignity, which is our new catchphrase these days. Our founder, William Booth, he realized that in order to get people out of addiction, in order to get people into a church to hear a sermon, in order to tell people that there was a God who loved them, that nobody who was dirty, homeless, in prostitution, in addiction, literally in the gutters, sleeping behind trash cans, really wanted to hear in their current situation that there was a God who loved them, because it didn't compute, doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so he very quickly formed the organization, the Christian Mission, which has now become the Salvation Army. And he bought a match factory and he put people to work. Huh. That's one of the first things that he did. And he began to tell people that in order to get what he was looking for, those souls that he wanted to save, he needed to take care of the physical body, the mental, the physical aspect. So one of our catchphrases is soup, soap, and salvation. You clean them up, you feed them, you love them. And that's where the relationship and salvation can come from. And that's really what we were born in. And the first officers of the Salvation Army in the East End of London were coming out of themselves addiction and prostitution. And the Lord turned their lives around. And they were able to then stand on the street corners and preach. Something we don't do anymore, but used to be very big.
Yeah, that's cool. I love the three S's, the soup, the soap, and salvation. I haven't heard that, and I think that really encompasses a lot of what we're trying to do here at the Salvation Army. You touched on this a little bit about officers and you being the wife of like Major McWilliams.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about like the dynamic between, being a wife, but also having like your husband working here, and then also like that's kind of a part of like the Salvation Army culture. And
it is. It's completely the Salvation Army culture. So if you are a Salvation Army officer and you are married, they must also be a Salvation Army officer. That sounds a little weird, but when you get to know the Army and understand our model, it has to be that way because they move us very often. We move on average every 3 to 4 years. We have no say-so for the most part in the move. And so if you were a Salvation Army officer and you were married to someone who was not and working in the general field, you have 5 weeks to move.
Wow.
And we don't really have anything but our personal possessions. So the Salvation Army provides for us a home like a parsonage. They provide for us a vehicle. They provide my dishwasher, and that all belongs in the home that we live in. Mm-hmm. So we can move very, very quickly. And if I was married to someone who was working in a company, that would not work very well.
Right.
Plus, it's a lot cheaper.
I believe that.
So if they hired me to do what I do now, our appointments couldn't afford that. Our different locations,
right?
Just simply couldn't afford it. So and going in that's the way it is structured, and so you go to the training school for 2 years, which is like seminary, if you will, and you learn a little bit about how to be an officer, not much, because you just have to live it to understand it, as any career, really. And from there, we go out as lieutenants for 5 years, and then captains, and then majors, and it kind of goes up the line from there. We're not military at all, which you have come to realize. Yeah. People think we're a part of the government or whatever, but we're not. William Booth just based his creation of the Christian mission, which then became the Salvation Army, on military terms and military uniforms, because at that time in Victorian England, military was very well respected, and he wanted everyone to kind of be the same, because they were, like I said, coming out of addictions and prostitutions and such, and they didn't have a lot of clothes of their own that they should be wearing in public, and that he wanted them. So he made us all look alike, and we do all look alike. But the dynamic of working together as a married couple is very interesting. And I have a lot of friends who say to me, there's no way I could spend all day at the office with my husband and then come home and spend all night with my husband. And it is not for everyone. You have to figure those dynamics out. And those dynamics can change from appointment to appointment. The way we work now as husband and wife, and as officers, each in our own right, is very, very different from 30 years ago when we went to Mount Airy, North Carolina as our very first appointment. So you just figure it out as you go.
Yeah, and you talking about like this, the military references, I think that the structure that they have in place at the Salvation Army is helpful in a way that it balances the religious aspect, but also like the services we're trying to provide. It gives that kind of that structure, but that nice, tasteful, like creative, like spiritual. But I was gonna say, even with you and Major, I feel like you're here and you work together, but you guys are off with both a full plate of your own. Major's off doing things, but you also have your own, and you stay very busy, but you guys still work as a unit. So it's very interesting to see that dynamic of you guys working together, but you still have your own roles outside of that.
Right. Yes, we do. And it's more so in the Corps, the officers that are appointed to lead their own churches and their own congregations. They're more working together, literally hand in hand all day long, because they're all working on the same programs, getting ready for the same programs. And in this role as an area commander, we do both have very different roles. And that whoever follows us in this appointment, they will look very different from us. They may split some of the responsibilities up differently than we do. It's not really dictated to us. In some positions it is, But in our position, it's really left to the officer to figure out whose strength is what, which makes sense.
Right.
You want the stronger to do all of that, which is why he raises money and I spend it.
I love that, especially with Angel Tree coming around.
Yes.
So I'm very curious about this, and you talked a little bit about like the relocation process. You know, what is that like? Like, you know, to me, it seems like so wild, and I don't know how I would process it, but what is that like being on the other side?
It's very interesting because I was born and raised and lived in the same town my entire life and went to school from literally from being in a crib in the nursery in the hospital next to someone that I went, you know, all the way through high school with and was in my wedding and, you know, that kind of small town, rural Mississippi, to marrying my husband and becoming a part of this culture where we move often. It was extremely difficult for me the first few years. It was very difficult. I had to deal with homesickness. I still do every once in a while, but I've come to know how I can handle it. I'm close enough now that I can get home if I want to, just for a quick visit and some really good catfish. And so, you know, that's good. But I have been in places where I couldn't do that. And so to be able to get home was a real treat, and it didn't happen often. It's interesting too, because you move into whatever house the Army has for you in that area. And so, you know, everything I have to decorate with doesn't work in every house. And so you just kind of have to figure that out as you go. But it's also been an incredible adventure. And I know people, and I still stay in touch with people from all over. We've been stationed in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Florida.
So I guess this is a question because I'm curious about it. Do you guys, when they relocate officers, like, are you guys officers for like the Southern Territory and you can get placed anywhere in the Southern Territory, or is it anywhere across?
No, it's anywhere in the Southern Territory.
Okay.
We can request to go on missionary service or to go to another territory. That is a very long process, and not everyone is accepted because there's not always somewhere to place them.
Right.
We have very good friends who are the territorial commanders for Japan. Just went over a couple of years ago. We also have very good friends who are now the business officers for Singapore.
Wow.
And they are living their best life, having a good time. So because of the way we've moved and been placed, we really know people all over the country and around the world. Since the Army is in 132 countries now, it's kind of neat to know that there are people out there that we know. And you ask about, do we stay in the Southern Territory? And I got off on one of my little rabbit trails. But I will tell you that, yes, we do stay in the Southern Territory. And it's interesting because they can move us anywhere they want in the Southern Territory. And we salute and go.
You know, that's something crazy, but I feel like at the same time there's something freeing about that. And, you know, like we say, like, things happen and the world works in mysterious ways, but I feel like, you know, each time you move, how I interpret that is you're put in a place where it either helps you grow or you help the place grow. And so it's interesting to hear, like, you guys get to move all of these places, and where we're sad to see when we get attached to the officers. Like, I've only been here for a year and I'm like, I don't want you to leave yet. So it's one of those things but it's exciting to see, you know, where you, like, how you grow and how you make changes on those places. Is it hard kind of when you leave?
To be honest, that depends on where you are and what your experience has been in that place. We have left places that I cried for months, and I have left places that I didn't shed a tear. And that's not because it was a bad place. They're just, and I think we all, if we're honest, understand this. Sometimes you just click and sometimes you don't.
Right.
And it's not that you don't have a good staff or a good congregation, but for whatever reason, you don't always just really meld together. And in those special moments when you do, it's amazing. And yes, it is very difficult to leave and to know someone else is coming in to take care of your people.
Yeah. That you make those relationships with.
Yes, and it is hard.
Thank you for, sharing a little bit about that. Selfishly, I've always been curious. Like the first thing when I got here and I heard that, I'm like, how does that work? So I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Anytime. I love to talk about the Army and how it works and its history because it's fascinating.
Oh, and there's so many layers to it. And I know when we were talking with Major, like he is a big history buff about the Salvation Army, and I just felt like I couldn't absorb all of it. It was so much. But, I love hearing and learning more things. Speaking of that, we talked a little bit about Angel Tree already with one of our interview guests, and I was wondering, because you kind of spearhead part of that organization for the rest of Metro Atlanta, can you talk a little bit about Angel Tree?
Sure. Angel Tree is something I have been doing for 30 years. And it's been around for quite some time in the past, in the old days, if you will. It was just a toy shop is what it was called, the toy shop. And families would come in and kind of shop for, 2 or 3 toys that, that they could pick up. And that has morphed into an incredible program all across the United States and in some other countries now as well. The Salvation Army is doing it. And so now it's called the Angel Tree program. And here in Atlanta, we have 2 different types of angels. We have mostly children, which is what people think of when they think of the Angel Tree. And most Angel Trees in the Salvation Army world provide gifts for children 0 to 12 years old. There are some that go a little older. We do not here in Atlanta. We go to 12 years old. And we also do seniors, those who are over 60, I believe. I'd have to check on that. But that's a neat program because a lot of times we don't think about the fact that there are a lot of seniors out there who are very much alone at Christmas.
Yeah.
And they don't have family, or they do have family, but they don't really touch base with them or see what their needs are.
Or they're not local.
Or they're not local,
right?
They can't get to them to really have a Christmas with them. So people in the Atlanta area can adopt an angel child or an angel senior, a silver bell, we call them sometimes. And that process actually began a month and a half ago. So applications are going on. They're usually ended by the middle of October. And people think, well, my goodness, why so soon? I mean, it's not even Halloween yet, and you're already stopping your applications. Well, when you're doing 9,000 or 10,000 people of these angels, that is a huge process, and there's a lot of computer work that has to be done, and a lot of companies now, which is where we send most of our angels to, or corporations now, they want their angels early because their people want to be able to shop and not be rushed and get what they want to be able to get for them. And then everything has to be back to us by December 6th at the latest, which again, for a lot of people think, wow, my goodness, that's still early.
Early, yeah.
But for us, it isn't, because we give our gifts out starting the 13th of December. In Atlanta, the way we work is 3 of our locations do kind of their own Angel Tree, if you will. They handle everything on their own, and they do everything out of their own facilities. Our other 5 locations that do these applications, we do in one localized warehouse. And we, and when I say we, myself, my Angel Tree coordinator, and a ton of volunteers, and a couple of seasonal employees are turned into elves. And we make sure that all of those families are ready and their children have been taken care of and the seniors have been taken care of. And then those packages go back out to the area that those families have signed up in. Because you can imagine in Atlanta trying to give all of those gifts out in one place when you have people from all over the area trying to get there. It would just be a nightmare for them. And many of them couldn't do it.
Right.
So we try to make it as easy as we can for the families to be able to pick up their gifts. And it's just quite a process. And it's something I would invite anyone who's truly interested in what the Army does, interested in donating to the Army, or becoming a part of a board or an auxiliary, to contact and come and see the Angel Tree Warehouse in progress.
Yeah,
so it's fascinating.
Yeah, because from the start of it, like just taking apart, we have to have people come to whatever location to sign up to be on Angel Tree, if their kid makes it in that range. And then they submit a Christmas list. So you're asking your kid a Christmas list in October, you know, and then you get that early, and then it comes to us. We put it somewhere so people can find it, and then hopefully someone adopts this angel, I'm assuming,
Right.
and then we have to hope for them to like shop for them, and then we
actually bring it back.
Yes. Because that would be my fear. Someone adopts and forgets.
It happens quite often.
Yeah.
It does. And one thing that we do, because we do anticipate that, some people just forget, honestly, in the busyness of the season. Who knows what's happened? Maybe there's been an illness in the family.
Right.
Maybe they lost a job unexpectedly themselves, and now all of a sudden they can't afford that funding to help this child. But we're prepared for that. And we have people, very generous people, who do just bring in bags of toys, or new toys. We do everything brand new with the angel tree because we want them to have a really nice Christmas and not have used items. But Atlanta is, like I said, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've done this in small communities, large communities, all across the Southern Territory. Atlanta is an incredibly generous community. I have just been bowled over the last 2 years watching the gifts pour in, even with the economy, the inflation. I was so worried last year that people were just not going to be able to do it, but they have not slowed down. And it's become a real tradition for a lot of families. They'll come in and say, "Oh, they'll bring their daughter with them, their 9-year-old daughter. Oh, we shopped for a 9-year-old girl, and I did this when I was a little girl with my mom and dad." And it's really become a generational thing for them to do, and it's really a beautiful thing. It's an easy way to teach your children charity and grace and love, and that they will never know the person that they have helped.
Right.
We do not allow any overlap between our donors and our clients, and there's many reasons for that. So you're going out on faith and buying stuff for this child, and we do everything within our power in our warehouse to make sure that what you buy for angel number 100 gets to angel number 100.
Yeah. So that goes back to like the manpower that it takes, and like the entering the data. That's why it takes so long, which is why we have to be ahead of the game.
Right. And when we do our distributions, I had someone ask me years ago, "Well, why are you doing it so early? You take everything out on Christmas Eve and deliver it to the families." No, we don't actually.
We don't play Santa.
No, we don't play Santa. There's a couple of things. One, we want the children to think that the gifts have come from mom and dad or from grandma. They don't need to know that they've come from the Salvation Army.
Right.
We want them to be able to. We also don't accept anything that's wrapped. If it comes in wrapped, we unwrap it. Because I want to know what's going out. I don't want anything inappropriate, which has happened. It's unfortunate, but the world we live in, sometimes somebody may just think they're being funny.
Right.
Send something very inappropriate. But we want to be careful of that. We also want mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever has custody of the children, to be able to go home and look at the gifts and see if it is appropriate for their child. Maybe what has been given to this daughter really should be given to this daughter.
Oh yeah.
And they can make that choice, and then they can wrap them in the wrapping paper that they like, so it's not weird. The children are thinking, "I've never seen that wrapping paper before. This is weird."
Right, but it also helps the family keep their own holiday traditions.
Yes, it does.
You know,
exactly. Again, back to that level of dignity,
right,
and being able to help them keep that. And to me, part of the fun at Christmas, really most of the fun, is watching the gifts under the tree for like a couple of weeks, right?
So the anticipation.
Yeah, with the anticipation and shaking and picking it up, trying to figure out what it is. So that also gives, again, the parents time to go home and put things under the tree so the kids can get excited.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. You were providing, to us, it just looks like it might be a gift, but it's providing a whole experience and a whole different level and opportunity for some of these families that they might not have just because of circumstances out of their control.
Right. So over the last 30 years of my officership, it's amazed me the number of people who are now doctors, lawyers, politicians, school teachers, just so many different things in their lives have come to me and said, or have brought angel gifts to me and said, "Yeah, I remember when I was a little girl, my dad had a hard time, lost his job, and if it hadn't been for the Salvation Army, we would not have had Christmas that year." And so, like I said, it never ceases to amaze me, the stories that people have. Because I particularly get so caught up in the daily work of it that I forget sometimes that there are real deep emotional stories behind a lot of these bags that are going out. It's not just a bag of toys. There is something going on in the life of that child that has put their family in a situation to need to ask for help for Christmas. So
it puts all those hours of work that you're like stressing in the warehouse, and it brings you back to like some child or some family is going to feel like special this Christmas through all of these hours.
All of this, right.
Works.
And mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or whoever are going to be able to put food on the table or make rent because they were able to use what money they had for those things. Even though we help with those when needed, but if they could do that, then if we could step in and help with Christmas, then that alleviates some stress for them at that time of year.
I love that. So we talk about, the Salvation Army heavily goes crazy in this time of year because the fall and the holiday season, but, work goes on all throughout the year. So can you talk a little bit about the yearly cadence here at the Salvation Army?
So used to in the days of old, we would say that the time after Christmas, January through the spring, was kind of our downtime. That doesn't happen anymore. And I think that's probably just the way of the world these days. I don't think there is any downtime for anybody anymore. As soon as Christmas is over, we start planning again. We have debriefings on how things went and what we need to change for next year. We start talking about upcoming fundraisers, such as the Women's Auxiliary Kettle Crush, because through Christmas, those meetings never stop. You still have your auxiliaries and you still have your core programs. Our officers are still preaching on, every Sunday and doing Bible study and youth programs. And then when the summer arrives and the kids get out of school and you think, oh, good, now I can take a deep breath. Well, no, because now many of our officers go right into running
Bible schools.
Bible schools, summer day camps. They do a lot of those, especially our 3 boys and girls clubs are full, throughout the summer. And that just really never stops. Our officers also not only taking care of their own locations, but like I mentioned, anytime there's a disaster, they're pulled away for disaster work. They have to figure out where to take their own vacations, which is difficult sometimes. They are always assigned to at least one camp every year. The camp we talked about earlier, Camp Grandview, they have to go up and do programs there for those children while things at home are still going on. Yeah. And they have their own families. They have their own children and their spouses if they're married. And so they try to find time for a private life as well. And it can be very, very challenging because in the Salvation Army, we do wear so many hats.
Yeah.
We may be the preacher on Sunday morning and the employer on Monday morning and the van driver on Thursday night. And it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, we pick up where it's needed.
Exactly. Yeah.
We talk a little bit earlier about how sometimes we just cater the needs to what's happening right then. And I think that's a perfect example of, one morning you might be giving a sermon, to the next you might be, passing out meals. It can change completely.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's really, really fun and a huge blessing for Salvation Army officers is that our uniform, not necessarily us individually, but our uniform, which we take a lot of pride in, gets us indoors that we otherwise would not be invited into or walk into. We meet people at some of the highest levels. And we may do that in the morning, a morning meeting, say, with a CEO of a corporation. That evening, we may be at the Red Shield having a meeting with our homeless families.
Yeah.
And, so our day can run the gambit, and that's a pretty neat thing to be able to do.
Yeah. You get to see the breadth of our community.
We really do. We see the highs and the lows.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you for sharing today. I've had a blast. You've taught me a lot, actually. Great. So I've appreciated it. And it was great to have this conversation. Yes, but is there anything else you want to say to our listeners out there?
I would love for them to get involved. and people say, oh, we don't have any, I can't give you money. Well, that's okay. We will take your hands and your feet and we'll take your heart. And we have a lot of different places where people can plug in. And if one volunteer opportunity turns out to be, I wasn't really comfortable with that, we'll find you something else.
Right.
And people have a lot to give. And we're very willing to help with that. So if they want to reach out, please do.
Love it. All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys.